Hello.
Good evening.
I've actually made it today on time
Yo,
instead of in the last 5 minutes. I'm always like,
oh, how's everybody doing today? Hope everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life.
well, I'm doing wonderful. Just opened up all my plants, cracked my whip, made my man go get some dirt.
Yeah, that's what we need to be doing is practicing living life. They're practicing everything else. We need to practice living life. We're all caught up in all this cognitive dissonance of the fiction. So
I love that post you made, 22-213.
yeah, you like that?
I just can't stop laughing. I can't stop laughing.
Man, I've gone over so much stuff in the last couple of weeks. It is pathetic, but it's just like nonstop. And every time I turn another page, there's something else, and I'm like, wow.
Well, you know what gets interesting when you read enough of the pages and you start to see how the story is connected. It's like, this is the same shit like over there. It's like trying to find out this grocery store stuff, and you're reading in the Department of Agriculture, and it's like you're back at licensing.
Yeah.
You're back at the definition of licensing under the Stamp Act.
Yeah. Did you like that one I showed you where the what was it? The Indian, it was under Title 25. What was it?
Did you post it today? Because I didn't upload the chat yet.
Oh, that was it was just something I pointed out in one of the Zooms somewhere, and I can't remember.
Yeah, it wasn't the one
but
where
it was
you
odd
were.
that it was odd that it was located in the Indian title, but yet at the same time, I think it had to do something with authentication or something. I can't remember.
And that's what's strange, because even when you're looking in the CPS stuff, you end up at Indian Affairs, because apparently those were the only displaced persons that were supposed to be in this foster system.
Well, you also have 42 USC 1471 is financial assistance by the Department of Agriculture.
That's like the
Social
Title
Security
7.
Act with, yeah,
Wait a
Social
minute,
Security
that's
Act
the
is
same title, subsistence to employees, emergency subsistence to employees, under the Department of Agriculture.
well, this is under public health and welfare, and it actually says Chapter 8A, slum clearance, urban renewal, and farm housing.
Of course, farm housing. That's when we get back to the I'm living in a hotel right now. You know, you've been a fishery.
Beneficiary.
Beneficiary. The whole thing just becomes like, what am I looking at here? Why am I talking about licensing when I'm trying to get to the grocery store?
Yeah.
And if you click on the link of the article that I put in that post, you'll see it's a .gov site where they're boasting about how the federal government is involved in every aspect of you going to the grocery store. What? Yep. What?
Yep. And you were talking about the liquor license earlier with the grocery store.
Yeah.
And then
that's all it is.
Their risk management is on tuna.
So why do they put like grapes and tomatoes in there? Just
because when they're shipping tuna, they don't ship tuna in a ship that's got absolutely no room. So they have more cargo room.
Right.
So they have to make it efficient use. So they ship other things with it.
So you put the liquor in the back.
Yeah.
You put some bananas and some onions. I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna take all. I don't need no liquor. I can get the potatoes and make my own. Give me them plants and that you promised.
Okay, tonight, I want to thank everybody for joining, as always. And tonight we're going to talk about venture capital, because when we're talking about these negotiable instruments, like I've mentioned several times in Senate document number 43, they talk about contracts payable in gold. And this is what we're talking about. The venture capital is what we write into our documents. We're the only ones that are going to put a value to it. When they put fines, fees, taxes, and everything, that's a commercial value known as through seeking Federal Reserve notes, which has zero intrinsic value. They're not even recognized as promissory notes today. So it's just a matter of negotiations. When we do negotiations, we've got to make sure our venture capital is recognized. So the first thing I want to talk about before we get started is the etymology of venture. And we're going to go on a little adventure. Venture, early 15th century, the risk or to risk the loss of something. Does that sound like insurance? It sure does. Insurance capital is what we're talking about. And it says general sense, to dare, to presume. Not, venture, not, have. Haywood, Proverbs 15:46. What that means, I don't know. But venture as a noun means fortune, chance, risky undertaking, enterprise of a business nature. And that's what we're talking about. The enterprise of a business nature in reorganizing their bankrupt entity as a faith-based union. That's all I'm doing. I'm just taking their bankrupt entity. I'm going to clear everything from that probate record, because that's a slander against my good name. It was never my intent to operate in person. Had I known that by reason and logic, as soon as I'd known that, I'd have done otherwise, because I am a faithful follower of the oath which I have accepted of my Father which art in heaven, and he's a respecter of no persons. I've known this for a long time. Had I known the presumption of this venture capital that they put forth through their commercial paperwork would have been putting me into personage, I'd have said no right from the beginning. So again, like I said a few times, when I talk about the codes, I like using the Lex LII Cornell sites. And when I talk about financial terms, I like to look up the Investopedia. So when we see Investopedia under venture capital, it says venture capital is a form of private equity, not public funding. Venture capital is the private equity that is converted for their public funds. That's that commercial paper. And if the terms are not stated appropriately, they are written for their advantage, for their venture capital. As trustees, they are allowed to invest for their own intents, as long as the investment is originally made for the beneficiary. And we all know the beneficiary of this system is the state. And a type of financing that investors provide to startup companies. So if they're investing in us, they're going to give us the venture capital to start up. That sounds like a gift.
Well, where would they get it from?
Exactly. See, that's, you guys, I hope everybody recognizes my sister Malika here. She's on top of it. Where did they get it from? They always get it from you because you are the importer of the information. Means you exported it from yourself and nowhere else. That is what they determine to be an export. And small businesses that are believed to have long-term growth potential. Venture capital generally comes from well-off investors, investment banks, and other financial institutions. Those other financial institutions are the living man and woman that have the assets that are unlawfully bifurcated and hypothecated for those funds through the paperwork. We're not recognizing it when we sign that title and we get that car registered. We're not comprehending that they are using our property for their venture capital, for their risk management, for transferring our property because we say, I don't know what else to do. They told me I got to do it. Quit believing the bullshit. However, it does not always take a monetary form. It can also be provided in the form of a technical or managerial expertise. Does that sound like knowledge? My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And this is the most valuable venture capital there is. And that's why they seek that knowledge from you. No matter what form you get it, you are exporting your knowledge or not knowledge to them so they can use it.
Our managerial expertise is also us participating in their actions against us.
Correct. Going to court.
Yep.
Acting as the trustee. The beneficiary is not required to do anything.
Nope.
I signed out of my good grace. UCC 1-308, so I wouldn't have to have that argument with those officers on the side of the road. And then I let them use their discretion thereupon if they wanted to come and issue that warrant.
So basically, they're working against you on both sides of the fence.
Correct. And you're working against yourself.
Yeah, it's more them getting us to work against ourselves because they know they cannot openly force us, so they influence us so we do what they wish for us to do, thinking like
the inducement.
that we only have that choice.
Basically, mind control.
Yep. And it says venture capital is typically allocated to small companies with exceptional growth potential or to companies that have grown quickly and appear poised to continue to expand. Now, remember, this is potential growth, meaning it's a span of time, not one event. Poised to continue to expand, a span of time, not one event. And again, concurrent and uniform with the concepts that I've been telling you. Everything operates on the concept of bankruptcy. It's a process of transition. The developing country is a process of transition. And our transition from personage to living like we're supposed to be and redeeming the land is a transitional process. It too does not happen overnight. It is a learning experience and exchange of information on both sides, like we were just talking about. It is a set of agreements that we're going to have to arbitrate. That is what contracting is about. It is never forced. Though it can be risky for investors who put up funds, but again, like we just discussed, where do they get those funds? The potential for above average returns is an attractive payoff. And again, he tells us constantly, thou shalt not want, for everything is already provided. You need only ask, and it's given freely. And this is the concept that you teach others so you can give freely to them. There is no need for venture capital. However, if you do find yourself in those positions where you have to force the issue, My situation, I've got a companion that worked for the public education system, and we're going to remove that stuff from probate. So we have to issue some attractive payoff for them. We're going to return our venture capital and return their commercial interests. We're going to revert that back to them. Now they hold that commercial title. They are the surety. They are liable. That means they are stuck to honoring the offer that they put in the public documentation here. Everything in the public domain is a public offer, unless it's plainly a fiction or a myth or just some publication of a poem or rambling or song. When we're talking about rules, codes, and regulations, treaties and stuff, those are all offers. Every last one of them is an offer. 48 CFR internally, 52.212-5 says contract terms and conditions required to implement statutes and regulations, or statutes and executive orders. That means they are offering you a contract.
So this is a contract we're looking at.
Correct. Everything we're doing is a contract of information.
You said that was a 48 CFR 50 what?
52.212-5.
Okay, I'm gonna need you to repeat that one more time.
I'm putting it in the chat.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you very
thank
much,
you.
Malika. Says for new companies or ventures that have a limited operating history under 2 years, venture capital funding is increasingly becoming a popular, even essential source for raising capital. And I noticed this in new farmers in the real estate investment loans. New farmers are targeted, especially if they lack access to capital markets, bank loans, or other debt instruments. Okay. Especially if they lack access to capital markets, bank loans, or other debt instruments, all of which are known to be negotiable instruments. So we can't lack the negotiable instruments. Again, what I profess that we are lacking is the knowledge. Hosea 4 verse 6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Learn this stuff and learn how to use it to your advantage, and quit giving them the information that they use to their advantage. The main downside is that investors usually get equity in the company and thus a say in company decisions. Basics of venture capital. In a venture capital deal, large ownership chunks of a company are created. Just like you have to create the company, you have to create the ownership and sold to a few investors through independent limited partnership. That's the creation of the ownership. Buying and selling.
Mm-hmm.
Without buying and selling, there is no owner. None. That is a commercial term. In regards to owning, fear not, for I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by name. You are mine. Period. There's your you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the debt you owe. He redeemed you. That's why you owe him and not anybody else. That are established by venture capital firms. You know what a firm is, guys? Anybody take a guess what a firm is? It's a firm offer. Look where it's at. It's in noun form of the verb by venture capital.
So the problem is people really don't know how to read the contracts that they're looking at.
Correct.
Yep.
It's all
They
the
don't know their
grammar and the
contract.
language. Yep.
They just probably think they're ads, but they're
Yep.
contracts.
It's not so much that you don't know how to read the contract. You do not know how to relay the contract to them. It's all about effective communication.
No,
So,
I understand what you're saying. What I'm trying to say is majority of people
Yeah.
have no idea that these are contracts.
Yeah. They don't, because they think that they have to fill them out to get whatever the thing is after.
They're
So they
trying to
think that
get.
it's just inconsequential and it doesn't actually matter what the terms and conditions are.
Yep.
So they just basically close their eyes and
Sign.
autograph.
Yeah, everybody believes they have to register their automobile. You find me one law that says you're required to pledge anything. Venture.
Well-
Sometimes these partnerships consist of a pool. Of several smaller enterprises. Does that sound like a pool of bonds?
Mm-hmm.
So what they do is they have a large owner, a large company, and they split it up into ownership chunks of several similar enterprises, and then pool them back together. One important difference between venture capital and other private equity deals. Notice. What was it? It said sold up there, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I can't find it. But up there it said sold. And for private equity, venture capital is where investors sell. Oh, there you go. Created and sold.
Mm-hmm.
They create It says investors create. In a venture capital deal, large ownership chunks of a company are created and sold to a few investors. That's a selling. Private equity.
They sit around and bid on you.
Yeah, private equity is a deal. It's a deal. It's not a buying and selling. It's a deal. It's an exchange.
So wouldn't that be like trading?
Correct. Instead
So
of
basically you're trading.
trade.
Being trade.
so I got just one question. When you say they, who are you referencing when you're saying they? Is it a
Whoever's
particular
using the monetary system to provide the venture capital, whoever's involved in the venture capital stuff without realizing that the venture capital funds have to first come from somewhere else.
So who do we target first in specific? Is it just do we just go to everybody, or who do we target? Because from what I understand with government, they have a hierarchy of everything, how everything flows. So do
Right.
we?
Well, everything in the government commercial system through both the district courts, which are administrative courts, and the judicial courts, those are all just probate courts. They're probate courts. A living man does not go to court. A living man expresses his will through arbitration.
Right. Well, holding court is when you start communicating.
Right.
That's how you hold
That's
court.
holding court. That's
Right.
holding court. And remember, when you hold court, that's your entourage with tour age. See, that's another one, tour. See, when you go out in the military thing and you get deployed, you're on tour.
Yeah, that's what they call it, tour.
Mhm. Tour of duty.
Yep. However, one important difference between venture capital and other private equity deals, however, is that venture capital tends to focus on emerging companies seeking substantial funds for the first time. In our venture capital writing, we're going to let them know we are not seeking the venture capital funds. We want the conversion of the capital venture funds that were bifurcated and hypothecated without our actual knowledge. Now that we recognize it and we have a living will, we want everything in probate removed and converted for our private, to establish our private estate and revert all the commercial interests back to the state. They can keep their funds, but all those funds that are out there in that probate floating around in all those bonds, we're going to do an acceleration and call all them bonds back so we can settle all the accounts and clear out all probate records. That residual commercial interest is going to get reverted back to them, placing them as the surety under liability for accepting the offer in return and honor for supposedly giving an honorable offer in the beginning. So all we're really doing is just correcting the record again. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I repent. I was a child all my life. I'm 54 years old, but I realize my competency now. And that's all we're doing. While private equity tends to fund larger, more established companies, we're not going to be working with established companies. We're going to work with we've already established. And this was antecedent to the formation of any government. Jeremiah 1 verse 5. I knew thee before I formed thee in the belly. I knew thee before thou was cast from the womb. I sanctified thee. I ordained thee. And when they talk about more established companies that are in contract and then violate those contracts, they sanction them. I don't need your sanctioning. I have been sanctified by the greatest power there is. Your sanctions do not apply. Companies that are seeking an equity infusion or a chance for company founders to transfer some of their ownership stakes. Now, first, a lot of times it sounds like that venture capital, you're taking a chance, you're going to the casino and you're putting your stake in the house on it. Or it could be that post. Yeah, see, there's your post again. How do you man your post? Do you man your post at the stake in the ground? Or do you man your post everywhere you go? And what is at stake when you go there? Everywhere you go. We were talking about this earlier in regards to that passport. That's a commercial stake. That's a commercial stake. When you go from your place of origin to a foreign point of destination, there's a risk in there. Whether it be commercial or your own, there's always going to be a risk. History of venture capital is a subset of private equity. So when we're talking about that venture capital that they're using through their bifurcation and hypothecation of our actual assets to a commercial paper form, again, where do they get it? Their entire system is funded on private equity.
I hear background noise.
I just got it. Their entire venture capital system is dependent upon private equity deals to convert the assets to a commercial paper form. And all they're doing is placing the value of that asset into their negotiations. They can never come after the asset. All things are forgiven. All things are forgiven. I make all things new, says the Lord. Right for these, or for right. Too many codes. Right. These words are true and faithful. Right. These words are true and faithful. As long as you stick to that principle in all your reading and your writing. Reading and writing. When you're reading it, read. These words are true and faithful. If something in there doesn't sound true and faithful to you, research it. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. They are destroyed for lack of knowledge of the word. In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. Because they're not reading God's word. They're reading commercial words, legal words, political words, religious words, science words, medical words. They're reading everything but the word, which is these words are true and faithful. And remember, like I said, they get all of their venture capital from private equity. Where do you think the full faith and credit comes from? They know they took it.
They say they took it. They tell you 31 USC 3123, the faith is pledged.
Yep.
And we know fictions have no faith of their own. They can have nothing of their own. They have no hands and legs of their own. They have no words of their own. All of it must come from the living man. So,
Okay, one last one. And then I'm going to open the board. And this is interesting. I'm sure you're going to like this one, Malika, because we are talking about 7, agriculture again. And it says taking abandoned real or chattel property into custody and
and
related
related actions. Ooh, I knew I liked Title VII.
chattel property sound like that birth certificate that you can attach a venture capital to and do all these reversions and conversions. It sure does. Because you want that landing certificate in exchange for the birthing certificate.
The only problem is people don't seem to embrace that the original of that chattel property can never be had by us unless we find and maim or shoot or something the custodian that has the original. So when people get copies and they want to authenticate those copies, it means nothing because the original does exist. It's just under a lock and it's in a vault. And one of our friends that was accidentally declared dead at the Social Security office is what revealed all of this. So people, the concept is there as far as the chattel property, but unless you could get your hands on the original, you're really not doing anything with that document. And then you don't need to. There's so many other ways to take real abandoned property.
Yep. Well, like I said, with my companion's case, we've got her long form and her short form, along with the receipts, because the commander shall cause receipts to be given, and the spoliated owner may have indemnity right here. And that's what we're doing. Indemnification and redemption. Indem, redem. Indem, redem. And so we see the process, though it should be simple, they've got 8 million different codes that construe it in all different kinds of manners. But when you find the right ones, that real estate loans, that's a tickler. Because that's the only thing they really have any authority over is land that's been condemned. Let me see if I can find it.
They can't get over that one. That who qualifies for a real estate loan. That one about who can qualify for a real estate loan, they cannot get over that.
Yeah.
They got to be a farmer or a rancher, and everyone can get out of their fictitious mortgage by just acknowledging that they never qualified to apply. Therefore, it was fraud in the inducement.
I've got one here. Oh, maybe this is it. Sale of interest in land, logs. We're talking about forestry, limitations on acquisitions, land acquisition authorities, real property transactions. I think it's in one of these. They tell you specifically that the land has to be condemned.
That's what we keep coming up with whenever we look into like even evictions and real estate, anything, it all comes up under the land having. It's usually revealed on the state level, like when you try to look up like city property and stuff like that. So in Ohio, working with Joe, for example, that's how we came across the condemnation.
There we
It's
go.
on. Same thing with Colorado. It's under Title 33 in Colorado. It's saying that it has to be condemned.
Yep. In time of war or when war is imminent, the United States may immediately upon the filing of a petition for condemnation. So in time of peace, they can't take any land.
Mm-hmm.
They have to acquire it through condemnation, period. During a time of war, it's the only time they can acquire, subject to subsection F, the Secretary of a military department may have proceedings brought in the name of the United States. The United States is the only one that can acquisition land, and it has to be through condemnation in a court of proper jurisdiction to acquire by condemnation any interest in land. So they can't even get the land. They can only acquire interest in the use of the land, and that is it. Period. And the only reason military use is commercial. Period.
Yep. And that's why they put all the apartment buildings in there and the hotels in there.
Yep. All transitional living units.
Yes.
Militaries are transitional units. They transition from point A to point B all over the place, constantly moving, being deployed and employed.
You know what's so funny? I did a video on the condemnation today, and it comes under the laws of secession. See, I went through.
Yes, that is correct.
So when you don't have a will, right? And this is why we dealing in rights of inheritance. I'm getting out of the commercial realm and deal. You were ordained by God. So ordained, take out the word and put in order. If you look at the etymology of the word, if you're ordained by God, you can give order too.
Yep.
So now you're talking about an inherent right by God. And when you don't have a will or your predecessor and you don't, then you are under condemnation. So everything you do, you are a stateless person. You have no rights because you haven't
Placed your interest in it yet.
You haven't placed your interest in nothing. This is why I say the will is the most important document, because all you got to do is take. So this is what I started doing when I started winning cases. I went on a 1718 winning streak. It's called errors, omissions, mistakes, and defects. All I did was communicate with anybody. And then I put the proper verbiage in there. If they don't correct the record and I do it by no representment, my stuff gonna stand.
Yep.
So whenever I say, and now 9 times out of 10, cause I ain't gonna lie, Keith did a lot of beautiful work. That's why I'm here. If you do it that way, then they have a fiduciary obligation to answer. They fail to answer, your claim is going to supersede anything they're saying. And 9 times out of 10, they're not going to communicate under the penalty of perjury. I haven't not one had anyone communicate under the penalty of perjury. They all waived it. So I say, if you fail to communicate under the penalty of perjury, you waive any and all errors, omissions, mistakes, and defects.
That's what we got to correct is those errors, omissions, and mistakes. And I just posted a comment in the chat section. I'll post it when I post a video. Mutual mistakes. Agree mutually. Forgive and forget. Both sides forgive. Both parties are no longer liable. It's a mutual mistake. Let's just get on with life. I love y'all. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Keith.
No, thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, Keith.